Wondering if it's going to show. Hello, everyone. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes to get more folks coming in. We've got many registered for this event, so let's just give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Thank you. Hello. Hello, everyone. We're going to give it a couple more minutes. Thank you for attending. We have a large registration list, and many have registered to attend. So we just want to give it let's give it till another minute or so, and we can get started. This is the first time we're doing a LinkedIn Live event, so excited about it. But we also want to make sure we have all the folks that wanted to come join. Okay, in the interest of time, we will get started. We have at least a good amount of folks that have joined. All right, guys, give me just a minute. I just want to remove this background noise or background music. Okay, let's get started. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and happy Monday. I'm super excited to be on doing this live. It's the first time we've done it, so apologies for any technical issues or difficulties, but hopefully this goes very well. I'm humbled to have so many registered here and joining us on a Monday morning or maybe afternoon, depending on where you're located. For those that do not know who I am, my name is Fayaz Rashpari, CEO for IntelliGuards. I have here with me an amazing panel of experts in the cybersecurity industry with experiences ranging from cybersecurity, threat intelligence, artificial intelligence, and honestly, it would be best if I just have them introduce themselves. I won't do them justice. So why don't we get started, and I'll hand it off to our panelists. Go ahead, guys.
Great, thanks a lot. I'm Alex Landstein here with StrikeReady. My career is pretty straightforward. I did 15 years. I started out at a company called NetForts, which we realized that wasn't a great name, and it became FireEye. So I was at FireEye for 15 years, and had a variety of jobs as we were a startup. But the most impactful thing that I had was helping out our breach responders to essentially understand what Mandiant breach responders were seeing on the front lines, and making sure our products could detect whatever we saw threat actors doing. So that was sort of where I got my start in targeted threat activity hunting. And then from there, I went on to Facebook or Meta, where I was responsible for a number of countries that were targeting users on platform. And now I've joined StrikeReady, where it's a culmination of all that, helping customer SOCs become more efficient.
Thank you, Alex.
And I'm Bob Pratt. I run product for MixMode, which is applying AI in the cybersecurity space. So hopefully I have some idea what I'm doing there. I've also been doing security since before I had white hair. My first startup was a company called VeriSign, where I helped create HTTPS and SSL. But more relevant to this discussion, I spent about 15 years building SIM products at ArcSight and then at Splunk.
Awesome.
Awesome. My name is Jonathan Peister. I'm here from Silent Push. So prior to Silent Push, I had a previous career focused on all things China. And later, I spent about 5.5 years at Dataminr, a real-time event detection company, where I was leading our research and development efforts in conjunction with our AI research team. I also had the privilege of spending some time at VeriSign, where Bob was. So a lot of connectivity in this group, and really excited to be talking with everyone.
All right, thank you, guys. So security operations has been something that has been near and dear to my heart for almost 20 years. And honestly, back when there really wasn't a SOC, usually it was just a hodgepodge of the NOC along with engineers, security engineers, doing some SOC work. And I'm really, really excited to have here, this panel and doing this. So we thought it would be nice to do a panel and discuss this topic, but actually with a focus on threat intelligence and artificial intelligence. And more importantly, we'll also talk about generative AI. So just to kick things off first, I'd like to start off with just some basic questions, and then we'll dive deeper into some harder questions. So number one question, I just have to get this out there, right, is what made you guys do this panel with us today? So go ahead.
I think just post-pandemic, it's great to get out and see some new faces. There's new companies out there. I mean, everybody sort of stopped gathering in person for a while. So now it's just great to do some networking and meet interesting folks with interesting companies solving problems that, I encounter in my day job. A few of these folks, are solving problems like for me at my day job. So it's great to get out there again.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Anyone
the
else?
same. I just like debating this sort of stuff, which probably may say more about my friend circle than anything else, but it's a sort of discussion I enjoy.
For me, it really comes down to two things. I had the opportunity in my last job to really be at the nexus of cyber and AI. And really, right now, with generative AI really getting so much attention and developing as quickly as it is, I think as a cybersecurity industry, it's really important for us to start to get together and really scope out the problems and opportunities that this new technology offers for us.
Well, I'm excited to have you guys, and I really appreciate everyone being here, right? So let's start out with a simple question. And this is a pretty common question that gets asked, but I'm going to kind of twist it a little bit and just kind of make it a little bit more challenging. And typically, you hear, there's challenges with analysts, and what are those challenges? Rather than just talking about challenges for analysts, how about we go one up and say, like, I'd love to know, what are the challenges you see in today's mature security operations centers? And let's leave the fluff out. No one can say alert fatigue. Everyone knows alert fatigue is there, and that's obvious, right? So can you talk about some of the challenges that you see in today's mature security operations centers?
I think it's the ease of social engineering. It seems to be getting worse. I don't know if it really is or not, but it feels like sort of social engineering to get into accounts and to take over systems and stuff is, I don't know if it's the availability of open source intel or how easy it is to do background research on people, or I don't know what it is, but it feels like it's getting worse, not better, which is a little surprising to me, but concerning as well.
For me, I guess if you're talking about specifically about challenges mature SOC, there's been this obviously very rapid change of on-prem deployed products to cloud deployed products. And what didn't happen as quickly as the shift to the cloud was the shift in telemetry gathering. So now when I go into modern SOCs, the capabilities that you used to have on-prem don't exist. And either the vendors themselves have to be prodded into providing telemetry into your email traffic, your network traffic, your authentication logs, things like that. Mic there. So it's the first thing is a telemetry challenge of just not having visibility into that anymore. And then the second challenge that I'm seeing is the explosion of vendors that customers are deploying. You're not just deploying like one or two or three vendors. And there's lots of churn inside the security operations center itself. So getting these analysts acclimated to new products, like they know that they want to say, hey, I want to do this particular search, or I want to do this particular hunt. But there's so many vendors now that, translating what they want to do to how a specific vendor has implemented a search, is a pretty big learning curve.
That's a good one. Vendor fatigue, basically. That's a good one. Go ahead,
And I
Jonathan.
can pick up on Alex's point there related to vendor fatigue and the fact that so many of these SOCs have so many different products and services they depend on. For me, focusing a lot of my efforts on partnerships and integrations, I think that integrations point is really key. It's great to have access to all these new tools, all this new data, all this new technology. But if you don't put as much effort and investment into integrating them together, you're really not going to get the benefit, and may actually end up overwhelming all of your SOC operators in the process.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more actually on that. Just coming from the product side and having numerous product jobs, that seems to be critical. Even hearing customers on integrations, right? And aside from having nice new shiny things, do interesting and fun stuff, and that's going to be impactful. If the integrations aren't there, then it just doesn't matter. So that's a good one. Thanks, Jonathan. So let's move on a little bit. What do you see as an actual absolute fail in SecOps? And let's kind of talk about SecOps. As we all know, it's been around for a while. It's nothing new, right? But maybe we can compare and contrast from SecOps of the past and even today, what hasn't worked, and then even moving into maybe how can we as an organization improve. So who wants to take that one first?
I think it's still the honestly a big fail of the security of SecOps and the security industry overall is the whole password problem. The fact that we're still using unique passwords for different systems and just passwords in general is, there have been people trying to solve that with product solutions for, well, pretty much forever, for at least 30 years. And you'll notice we're still not using PKI as an alternative to passwords for logging into systems in general. I tried to promote that 30 years ago. Didn't work, or hasn't worked yet anyway.
As a consumer of VeriSign certificates, I feel you. I feel you, Bob. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, just building on that, the password guidance for sure. Even seeing in, the way that, friends and family close to me, the password guidance. I think mathematicians proved a long time ago that passphrases had more bits of entropy, right? Very standard than a short, complex password. But still, that's not the guidance that like the typical user gets. So whether it's password rotation policies or password complexity, everybody knows what the right answer is, and very few companies have actually implemented it. The second part, you talk about PKIs. I mean, everybody knows that hardware keys, YubiKeys, increase enterprise security by a literal order of magnitude, and yet the enterprise adoption is still low. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
I think, Alex, you raised an interesting point there, which is in many cases, we know what the problem is, and we also know what the solution is, where what a good solution to the problem is. But for whatever reason, the nature of the organization makes it difficult to adopt solutions that we know actually work. And I think, hardware security solutions are definitely one that I would expect to see more adoption of in the future, despite those challenges.
Yeah, we can keep talking about this topic, but I want to keep moving on over here. So the general consensus really is it's password security, certificates. We could do a better job around how users log in, and social engineering, of course, because of the ramifications it has around not doing these things properly, right? So it's good points. How about let's talk about threat intelligence for a little bit, right? This is a very broad topic. Tell me from your perspective how threat intelligence plays into security operations.
I'm happy to take that one. Yeah, I think for threat intelligence, it's really about enabling you to effectively prioritize your defensive efforts. It's expensive to defend an organization. It's very difficult. And threat intelligence is what empowers you to make good decisions and informed decisions. I think the challenge is, a lot of threat intelligence is based on post-breach information, where it's really that intelligence value is from those TTPs, how threat actors are really, how they're achieving their end goals. I think another thing that's important about how threat intelligence fits into security operations is really the context it can provide you as a defender. This can be both useful for ongoing threats, but also in the case of an incident response. When you have quality threat intelligence, it can help you compare what you're seeing in a particular incident with kind of known information about threat actors out there in the world. So I think that context factor and that early awareness and informing your defensive efforts are why threat intelligence is key.
Yeah, just before Alex and Bob go, I just want to clarify for the audience, right? You mentioned a term that's pretty common in the security industry, TTPs. And it's it's an intelligence term. It's it also used by many governments, etc. But can you explain what TTPs are?
Yeah, no problem. TTP stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures.
Thank you.
You could really think of it as the behavior of a threat actor, and that's why in threat intelligence, it's one thing to have a piece of information like an IP address associated with a threat actor. It's another thing if you have a TTP-based approach to understand how that threat actor sets up their IP addresses, where they do it, and with what configuration. So that's a difference between a TTP-based approach and kind of a general information approach with threat intelligence.
Thanks, Jonathan.
And then we also managed to confuse everyone by also having TIPs or TIPs, which are
Yes.
threat intelligence platforms.
We're very good at that in this industry, is confusing people with acronyms.
Yes. How many acronyms can we have?
Yeah.
The only thing I'd add is that a lot of the enterprise customers I've talked to over the years seem to have kind of love-hate relationships with their threat intel providers. Like they have to have it, it's important, but everybody always seems to be looking for like a better solution somehow, whether it's higher quality or more timely updates, or whoever they use, they seem unhappy with. And I've never worked for a threat intel provider, but it's always struck me it must be a challenging place to be because it just seems to have general disgruntlement, let's call it, with the vendor that you've got. And that's never a fun position to be in as the vendor. if your customers are sort of just not terribly happy with you, but nobody's doing it better either.
Yep. So Alex, I'm going to give you a harder question because you have a threat intelligence background, and we worked together for a while. So how can organizations actually get better at operationalizing this when you have and let's think about it, right? There's millions, tens, hundreds of millions of indicators that are out there, right? How do you kind of take this and actually operationalize?
Yeah, like one of the challenges one of the things that happens when you work in a SOC is that like there's fire drills all the time. And a lot of times the fire drill, like your boss comes in like waving a piece of paper. They might have read something in the New York Times or on a blog or on Twitter or on some paid threat intel feed, who knows? And they're like, did this hit us? Like what's our impact? What's our exposure? So like the first thing that I always try to help people do is build a program around being able to answer a few questions about any threat intel report that comes out. All threat intel reports, there's, two ends of the spectrum, right? You'd be like very, at a very small level of like understanding IPs and domains and hashes and URLs and file names and file paths and stuff like that. And then there's the more behavioral based, like what does this threat actor usually do in an environment? Let's just try to get the blocking and tackling out of the way, right? So the boss comes in, waving a piece of paper. You should really quickly be able to answer, did this thing hit us, right? You're ingesting your DNS logs, your proxy logs, your endpoint logs, your email alerts, your antivirus alerts, whatever, right? You should be able to, within seconds, understand, were there any alerts that were actually generated that match any of these indicators, right? That's pretty straightforward. Then it gets harder as we go on, right? So did this thing hit us? We should be able to answer that really quickly. If not, let's work on making sure everything is, all our alerts are flowing to the right place. The second part is, if this thing did hit us, would our tools have detected it? And would the threat analysts actually have noticed the alerts? A lot of vendors play a little fast and loose with detections, where if you ask them, hey, did you detect this threat group I just read about? Every vendor says, yeah, of course we do. Of course we detect it, don't worry about it. But the way the detections are written are often very brittle, or they're in such a manner that your SOC is going to ignore, like an informational type alert or a low severity type alert. So the first thing, did this thing hit us? The second thing, if this did hit us, what would our tools have said? So like, let's take these threat indicators and try them out in our environment, right? Maybe it's a file. So that means like running it on an endpoint with your endpoint agent enabled. Maybe it's an email. We're going to send an email with that email address or spoofing that email address. A URL, right? We're going to look at our proxy logs, IPs. Let's look at our firewalls. So like run all those indicators through every security tool you have and just see what they say. And if you can do that programmatically, over time, you can say like, oh yeah, these tools are very fast at detecting this threat and these tools are slower. And that gives you a benchmark for understanding, how good a job your vendors are doing.
Testing and validating.
It's, when I describe it that way, people say, oh yeah, that would be really nice if I could do that programmatically.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally makes sense. Yeah. So let's get into maybe if we can share some stories, right? So maybe not everyone has a story around it, and this can get hard, but can anyone share a story when you saw an intelligence-led program that was actually working? And of course, it's probably not gonna be perfect. And there's areas you can improve or they can improve. Then let's talk about that too, right?
Yeah, I guess I'll keep talking.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, there's one thing that like sticks in my mind. So after a breach, you find that a large scale breach, right? You find that enterprises, or many enterprises, do a pretty good job at understanding the threat actor that hit them and making sure they don't get hit by that threat actor again, right? If you get hit by somebody else, well, okay, but let's make sure we understand how, like John was saying, like who that threat actor is and how they set up their infrastructure, right? Where they buy their certificates, what their SSH keys are, what, do they use a particular, LIR, RIR to get their IP addresses, or what data center do they buy services from, their domains, their NS records, their, have specific SOA records, whatever they are. Understand, model that threat actor, because when they set up new things to target people, there are overlaps, right? It's very, very rare that a particular threat actor has a brand new infrastructure for every single attack every single time. There's maybe 1 or 2 or 3 out there that do that, but
Yeah.
it's pretty rare. So like with that win, there's this win that I was thinking of a threat actor that came back into a local hospital type organization that we worked at a long time ago. And we saw them setting up their new infrastructure by monitoring passive DNS and active DNS resolutions before they actually attack somebody. So like we, by defining a PIR, these priority intelligence, like who you're looking for, right? By defining PIRs, you could say, now I'm defining this group. I'm going to track their infrastructure. And when I see them spinning new things up, I want to proactively get notified about it through Silent Push or through other tools like that. So that win was, we were able to stop the phishing before the phishing even happened, right? We knew it was going to come based on the patterns of domains. We could at least, at a bare minimum, prevent that victim from getting re-victimized by the same group.
Thank you, Alex. You're actually speaking something, and without me talking, I want to maybe give Jonathan and Bob a chance too. But there's something called pre-attack out there, right? And I'm sure everyone's aware of it. Maybe not everyone on the call or on this webinar is aware of it. But can anyone kind of talk about that, because you're hitting some specific key points that are very, very in line with pre-attack matrix. And everyone talks about attack, which is after the fact, right? So
Yeah.
Jonathan,
Sure.
I'll let you take that one. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to speak to that. So what Fayaz is referring to is in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This would really amount to the left-hand side, or the first part of the framework. And the way the MITRE ATT&CK framework works is you can think of it going from the initial conception of an attack all the way through the end. So it's a story essentially. So with pre-attack, this is really about the threat actor setting up their infrastructure, and it's very much related to what Alex and I were talking about. And what's valuable about pre-attack information is, in particular, it can help you identify the relationships between various pieces of infrastructure. But with the relationships, you can then establish patterns. And it's those patterns that Alex was referring to that are really valuable for creating defensive tools, defensive detections, and that pre-attack information is what's really useful for producing those patterns that you can use to defend your organization.
So let's talk about getting into some metrics, right? That's becomes a big thing, especially in the SOC, right? With metrics, SLAs, even me, being either working alongside or overseeing SOCs or even training SOCs. I've seen a lot between from incident identification to closure, and they're wide and long ranges of times, right? What do you see a successful program, and how quickly should you be able to respond effectively to incident closure?
I think it all depends, honestly. I mean, I think metrics are important, so you do know, what you're good at and what you're not good at. But where I've seen them fall apart a lot is when senior management tries to be too doctrinaire, like we respond to every incident within X, or we solve every problem within Y. And it really depends. Some things are easy to fix and others are hard to understand, and you have to find out what's going on before you can do anything. So I've seen a lot of SOC teams and good SOC engineers be driven bananas by somebody saying, well, why didn't this one get fixed within the SLA? And it's like, well, because it was a brand new very complex attack that we'd never seen before. And so it took longer. I mean, I think that's my main thought on metrics, is just don't over rotate on them to the extent of thinking about, what does it actually mean? Not just what's the raw number telling you.
Fair enough. So we've been talking about SOC and intelligence for the first 20-25 minutes. What I want to do is definitely want to kind of dive right in, and I'm going to dive right into the world of AI, but I'm going to share a stat with everyone here that may or may not have been aware, right? And it's more around not applicable, but usability and adoption of OpenAI, or let's just take ChatGPT. And so typically, if you look at the past of just in general, like just applications and things like, and not saying that they're probably using some versions of AI, et cetera, but just in general applications like Instagram and WhatsApp and Snapchat and Telegram and all the things that are out there, right? The adoption for even getting them to 100, they all have 100 million, past 100 million users, right? but all of them took a lot of time. They took anywhere from, you know, a year to 5 years or more to get to that 100 million adoption. And what was interesting with ChatGPT and OpenAI was that came so quickly. It came quicker than anyone thought it would. It was extremely fast growth. And the numbers that I remember reading was like 2 months where there was 100 million on OpenAI platform, right? So it came very fast and very quick, right? So with that said, and now, you know, I think that a lot of people may be just kind of still intrigued in understanding, well, what is this? And how does it even compare to just AI, right? So basic question, but maybe it still needs to be known, right? Can one of you guys take this one, and can you explain the difference between just AI and generative AI?
Yeah, I mean, generative AI and large language models in particular, which is, ChatGPT, really work by learning on a large corpus of data, like in the case of ChatGPT, generally, text data, and then essentially doing predictive generation of new text, new information. So, in other words, it's not that it's actually AI that knows what the right answer to a question is, but it knows what's the most common response to this question, essentially. And so it'll give you an answer based on its best guess, based on similar questions or identical questions or similar text strings are followed by this other text string. And so that's what we're going to give you. And so most of the time, that's what you want from most of the time that gives you the answer you want, which is sort of the right answer. I mean, I don't know how often, but let's call it 80% of the time, something like that, that you get the right answer. The problem is 20% of the time you get an answer that is wrong in some way or other, but it's presented just as confidently and just as correctly as the other 80%. And so the trick is knowing which is which. And that's what scares me about people using generative AI for security defense, because the worst thing that can happen in security is if you think you've solved the problem and then you go away happy and you haven't actually fixed the problem at all. Like if you think you locked your car door, but you actually left it unlocked, that's worse than you know it's unlocked.
That's a really good point, right? Yeah, I mean, it's true. People go to ChatGPT and just ask a question, and then it's just like, it looks like it's the authoritative source. Like it's telling me, this is what ChatGPT told me, and there is no feelings behind it. It's just basically that's the answer. It's just confidently saying the response immediately too. It's like there's no very good point. Guys, any other comments?
Yeah, I just have a quick example that comes to mind of like the difference between generative AI and AI more in totality. So with generative AI, kind of as Robert was alluding to, it's a creative process. It's creating something. Like for example, you could use OpenAI's DALL-E to create a logo. Whereas for other forms of AI, like a computer vision logo detection, what it's doing is it's been trained on a large data set, and it's looking for patterns that indicate that this image contains one that is in its training set, a logo it has seen before. So you can have both AI that creates a logo as well as AI that's designed to be able to detect a logo that's been created elsewhere. So it's just a type of AI, but a different one. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just on the confidently wrong thing, like
Yeah.
it's such a strange phenomenon. It's very difficult to combat. I was working with this endpoint agent Jamf, it's a Mac endpoint agent, right? And it's JAMF, and I didn't know how to pronounce it. And if you go to Google and you say, "How do you pronounce Jamf?" you expect to get some sort of answer, one of those little things where it like reads it for you, kind of thing. And the Google AI said, "Oh, Jamf, it's pronounced with a soft J, like Yamf." And I was like, "Oh, wow, I didn't really know that. Like, that's really interesting." And then I tried like digging in, like, why are you saying that? And somebody on one of the Jamf like customer support message boards was making a joke. Like, that's an obviously funny joke that it would be pronounced Yamf. But Google's like, "Yeah, that's how you pronounce it." I was like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that."
Wow, there you go. That confidently wrong. Yeah. So, okay, let's get into talking about the world of AI, right? Can generative AI actually fit into the SOC model? And if so, let's talk about how.
Yeah, I mean, I think So there's definitely a place for AI, right? What do I need to know about this threat, right? That is super useful. Am I vulnerable to this CVE? That's super useful. Tell me about this threat group. Tell me about this threat group in a way that my boss will understand, right? Those are great applications of AI. Generative AI, I've seen like one really solid use case of this like parser. Like if anybody's ever written parsers for Sims, these like comma separated values come in or JSON blobs or whatever. And these devices spit out these blobs, and occasionally they get broken, right? There's a weird character formatting, something's not escaped properly, whatever it is, this blob comes in broken. I saw this generative AI that would generate a parser for you, and like a Python parser. And if there's a problem in the data, it could like chunk out the part where there's an error so that you could still have like the rest of it be super usable. So like I'm not like a huge fan of generative AI for security operations, but when I saw that, I was like, whoa, like that solves an actual problem.
Yeah, it's a great time saver. And the other great thing about it, to my worry, is that you can very easily eyeball, is it working or not?
Yes.
Like if it suddenly gives you timestamps that are 2,000 years in the future, you go, okay, that's not right. But if it parses it correctly, it generates the right parser, then you can see that it's working really easily. So it avoids that kind of confidently wrong problem as well and saves you a lot of time.
Yeah, I think that's the real power of the code generation use case for generative AI is you can kind of test whether or not a hallucination is occurring if the code is functioning as you intended it to. And that use case that Alex presented around parsers is a great one. Another one that I've been experimenting with is using generative AI to aid in development of custom tools. Say for example, I need a custom tool that can take a URL as input and return to me a pivotable data frame with all of the IOCs that were detected. You now have the capability with a tool like ChatGPT to provide it some instructions and not only giving you executable Python code, but giving it to you in a format with a user interface, like in the context of a Streamlit app. So that I think is a very powerful tool potentially for cybersecurity users and even SOC operators when they have a need on demand. Instead of needing to reach out to a data analyst or someone on their dev team, being able to use some of these generative AI tools to create tools on demand that really fit the exact needs that they have in that moment.
So you touched on the topic that I was going to get into on the other side of things, Jonathan. I think this is a perfect time to talk about it here now. So it's really, talking about the adversaries and the bad guys doing similar things too, right? So, thinking about the malicious actors that are out there and using these same types of tools for their own benefit. So for anyone that's not aware, right, there's tools out there called Worm GPT. There's also Fraud GPT. And they're essentially new services or new.
Oh, might have lost Fides for a second there. I think what he was going to ask was about the way that malicious threat actors leverage AI type tools.
Yeah.
I'm not like there's a lot of hype, especially like in the Washington circles about the North Koreans are going to use AI to build a missile, and there's the hype train is real with this one. But I am already seeing, or at least what I suspect to be AI generated tools specifically around phishing, where before like some of this like pig butchering or whatever, these scams, like a person would have to run each scam, and like a person can only have like a realistic conversation with a handful of people at once, 5, 10, 20 people at once or something. But with these like the AI driven tools, you're able to see these threat actors, phishing and having actual conversations with hundreds of people at once. And just along those lines, also the deep fake abilities, there's been a whole bunch of like human oriented attacks on help desks in the news. I certainly don't want to bash on any vendor or victim or anything like that, but the people's solution are like, okay, you have to call the person and talk to them. And the ability for these deep fakes for audio is very good. For video is getting scary good, where you could call the help desk and have a video call with someone.
Right, and they think they're actually talking to the CEO. It sounds like the CEO, so well, he must really want those gift cards.
Yep.
I hear his voice, and it's really him. Yeah, I think that's the other thing that scares me about the generative AI stuff is it's one of the reasons that spam works is because it's so easy to send out. You get a mailing list and you can blast out, 1 billion email messages for virtually no cost. Spear phishing, where you're focusing the emails on specific individuals, as you just said, Alex, takes a lot of time per individual to craft that. Generative AI will make that a lot easier. And then all of a sudden, geez, if spear phishing became as cheap and easy to do and customized emails get as cheap and easy as just sending out spam, that becomes a real problem because, those are trickier to detect. And if we all have to put a lot more brain power into filtering out really subtle, clever phishing and spam messages, geez, that's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, because Bob, I think you're both hitting on the fact that it lowers the barrier to entry, but it also can increase the scale and sophistication for some of these attacks, because that social engineering use case is so ideal for generative AI. That's definitely one to keep an eye on. And even the case of something that we actively track at Silent Push with domains generated through domain generation algorithms. If you extend that concept a bit and think about how AI could enable more sophisticated phishing domain generation, that definitely is something of concern that we'll want to track as an industry.
Yeah, like we built a feature years ago into ArcSight SIM to detect algorithmically generated domains. Because back then it was easy because they looked completely like number strings essentially. But yeah, with ChatGPT, I've never tried it, but I'm sure you could just tell something like that, generate 10,000 URLs that look like they belong to real companies and are still available, through a registrar. And I'm sure you could do that and get, however many arbitrarily large number of domain names you wanted that look like humans really created them. And yeah, that's frightening.
Yeah. So I'll step in for Faiz here. So, build versus buy, right? That's the common debate, right? Should I do it in-house, or should I get a third party to do it? Whether it's a specific detection tool or whether it's a product. So it's specifically when we're talking about SOCs and MDRs. Hey, Faiz is back. SOCs and MDRs. The ability to buy it. Like, is it better to do it in-house? Your environment better than anybody else, or is it better to bring in an outside firm, probably a lot cheaper, probably similar or better quality? Like, what do you guys think?
I think it goes back and forth. I mean, honestly, I view, I think it was MSSPs, I guess, managed security service providers, as being analogous to CISOs, in that when there's a security problem, whatever you've been doing, you fire the human or the organization and you replace them with the opposite. Because in my view, almost any large enterprise is going to have occasional security problems. Even if you're the NSA, you're going to get breached. Certainly if you're a commercial provider, you're going to get breached or have malware. Something's going to happen at some point. And to some degree, I think that's true whether you're using a service provider or you're doing it in-house. And a lot of times it's just that's your scapegoat. And then you switch to the other approach each time. So I've seen a lot of companies kind of cycle through doing it in-house, and then after a while going to a service provider, and then after a while coming back in-house. Not because either is better or worse. I think they both work depending on the organization, but there's often a shoot the messenger approach to, well, we need to, whatever we were doing clearly didn't work because it failed and we got this breach. Therefore, let's switch to the other. And it's not that it really failed. It's just that it's impossible to be perfect. That's probably a cynical view, I guess.
I lost my connection and totally apologize. Sorry, guys. I don't know if my last question even got answered, or if anyone heard it.
We kept going.
It was okay, great. Okay, so we'll move on. And I kind of caught a little bit of what you were saying, Alex, around MSSPs and maybe MDRs, and actually had a question on that. Maybe we can kind of pivot to that, and then we can kind of start, ending things here. But on the note of security teams, and having limited budgets, right? In your opinion, is it better to actually build your own stock or use those services, or any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I can jump here a bit. I think part of it is really that's important is being honest with yourself as an organization about how much resources you can really commit to the problem. I think it's fine to build your own, but I think if you're a relatively small organization and you lack the team to build something of quality that could really match what you could get from a third party, that's when organizations can get in trouble, when they're a bit too ambitious relative to their personnel and budget.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe you guys already talked about this too. So it's good to hear your opinion as well.
Yeah, well, I didn't get to go though, so I'm the most.
Oh, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, no, I personally favor a mix of the two. I don't think anybody knows your environment or cares about your environment like you do. But you got to have ready access to outside experts. If for no other reason than to know like prevalence data about the stuff you're seeing. Like, hey, I'm seeing this file, this IP, this email. Like, am I getting targeted with this, or is this being sent to 10,000 different people? And the only way you're going to have that type of visibility is if you can see, multiple customers' data, and then obviously having retainers or having virtual SOCs where you can do staff augmentation where necessary to ramp things up very quickly, whether it's in analyzing a whole bunch of events or pulling apart a file or just getting an outside opinion on do I really need to care about this thing, or can I just blow away the infected system?
Yeah, just to pile on that, Alex. Sorry, Fayaz. I was going to just to pile on what Alex was saying. I think the other place where bringing in outside experts can be really helpful is incident response, because once you've been attacked or breached, what it was, and you can find somebody who's an expert in that exact thing to help you. Whereas your internal team are probably going to be more generalists. They're less likely to be like a top 10 world expert on this particular issue.
Is there, from your experience, like a specific area that they should pay close attention to as they build out the program? Is it IR, or is it other specific things that a customer should be looking at to as they pay attention to that, right? Like, is there one thing that you suggest, like, hey, pay attention to that one specific thing?
Mine would be general good practices, but especially around backup and DR. Like, think about it. In some respects, there's really no difference between being hit by a ransomware attack or having your data center burned to the ground. In either case, you've lost access to all your data and you need to get it back somehow. So if nothing else, like when I talk to small businesses and they're like, what should we do for security? I'm like, the first thing you should do is make sure you do good, regular backups, because you're going to get breached at some point. But if you can restore from a week-old backup and be back up and running again, that's a good thing. And that's important. Like I said, even if you're not worried about network security, you're worried about fires. You're worried about hard disks crashing.
Yeah.
Backups.
One of the things I always try to get people to put in place, you're talking about metrics before, is the metrics in the times when there's not a lot going on. People think of a SOC as hair's on fire. There's always something horrendous. You got to work 24/7. It's not really true. There's a lot of downtime where there's just not a ton going on, and you want to be able to generate metrics from your frontline analysts so that they can not just they can show work product, but they can show what they did. Right? People are like, well, there's no incident. Like, what did you do all day? Right? So being able to say like, oh, I looked at these 1,000 threat reports and I triaged all the indicators and I looked across our environment and I tested our environment and I ran simulations, like that's super valuable, not just for like the warm and fuzzies, but to actually like, show what an analyst is doing when there's not much going on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Alex. I think and typically you always think about like SOC being reactive, but how do you make the SOC actually, not be that? And to your point, back when I was, there was days where it would just be, it was quieter, and then we, would try to run proactive types of, searches or hunts. So on top of that, like, can we put metrics around that and see like what we did, how we did it, put reporting together, and actually, that could be used for even management and understanding how you actually better it, right? And mature the SOC. That's a really good point. So we're getting close to the end of the hour. I didn't want to run all the way to the end. I definitely wanted to kind of spend just a couple minutes on our great panelists' backgrounds, and just kind of want to, if you guys don't mind, just if you don't mind, just give me tell me a little bit about what you're doing today in the great battle against cybercrime. So, Jonathan, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so Silent Push, our mission is to protect organizations from threats before they launch. It's really what we've been talking about here today. And our approach to doing this is internet mapping. So we map out the internet's infrastructure using DNS data, IP scanning data, certificate data. And we also have an in-house threat research team that takes that data that we're collecting to produce original research and really try to identify those TTPs we were talking about earlier as they emerge. And what we do is we take that research and we produce feeds of intelligence that we refer to as indicators of future compromise. And these are those new observables that we've identified using those TTPs and our daily data collection. In addition to the data and the research that we're producing, we also want to make sure we're making this available to customers in an enterprise app that we produce. We also have a free community app that anyone who's listening is welcome to sign up for and try. And there you have access to threat intelligence management tooling, as well as a wide variety of threat hunting tools that can really help you identify things as they emerge from our data set. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Very cool. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next, I guess. So at MixMode, we're basically trying to solve the problem I spent most of the last 20 years creating. SIEMs and security data lakes are great for collecting all of your security data from all your different devices and sources, bring it all together, but it takes a lot of skill and expertise to run all the searches and write all the rules to detect threats in that mass of data. And virtually every company I've ever talked to always wants more security people, and either you don't have budget for them, or even if you have budget, they don't exist to be hired. So what we're doing at MixMode is applying AI, specifically unsupervised machine learning, to analyze those masses of security data you're already collecting, that you've already got in your SIM or your data lake, and find additional threats that your current team is missing. Not because they're not good, but just because there's never enough hours in the day for them to do every search and write every rule that they'd like to. So we're augmenting them with machine learning. So I'm, like I said, trying to solve the problem I spent a long time creating.
And over at StrikeReady, our mission is to empower the defenders and to make their life easier. When an incident comes in, when an alert comes in, there's a whole bunch of things that they still do in like a swivel chair kind of format. I'm going to pull this data from this thing, and it's in a different window or a different authentication system. So we try to do all that for you. So when an alert comes in, an email alert comes in, or a network alert comes in, it's got a URL, an IP, a domain, a hash, a file path, whatever. We want to automate that whole process for you, right? We want to go and pull an email for you automatically. We want to go and look on the system to see if a file exists. We want to leverage Silent Push and pull up, related domains and IPs. We want to, pull files off the endpoint and send it for analysis to a sandbox. We want to do that whole triage process for you. We want to do, all the vulnerability scanning, right? We want to pull, hey, this alert came in for this vulnerability. Let me look at your recent vulnerability scans, your patch management tools to understand, which systems are vulnerable to a specific threat. We want to work with whatever third-party SBOM vendors you're leveraging to say, hey, this Log4j thing just happened. Do I have any devices that have Log4j installed? Just that question, right? You read about this thing, this embedded vulnerability in a TIFF parser, right? A PDF parser, Log4j. Do people really understand where that thing is even deployed?
So Alex, that's super interesting. Question for you, and then we'll end. It sounds like source. So do I have to kind of that's tough to do in making these playbooks. So do you have to kind of make that playbook to make that happen?
Yeah, thanks. No, so we have 400 of these separate vendor integrations already written. Wow,
that's cool.
We do what we think an analyst wants to do, whether that's pulling up identity information or pulling up where does this user usually come from, what IPs, what domains, what time zones, what does their system usually look like. So we do all that like what we think you want. But then we track how you actually use the tool. You have to opt in, obviously. And then if you start pulling from different data sources through our tool that we didn't have modeled and we didn't have suggested and we didn't have already done for you, the system just learns over time. So it can learn from one analyst to make the other analyst better. It can, essentially like prompt people like, this other user typically does these 10 steps when they get a static indicator. would you like us to do those for you? Would you like us to do those automatically the next
Awesome.
time? Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So, hey guys, I'm honored to be partnered with all of you guys and be partnered with these cutting edge technologies and cyber companies. I like to thank everyone here that joined this live webinar, and apologize for the break in my connection here, but looks like we were able to recover. And really, really happy to have everyone here and this awesome group of panelists. Thank you, Alex, Jonathan, Bob here. Great discussions, great talk. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Have a happy and safe Halloween tomorrow. And also, please do check in with us and ping us if there's any other cyber topics that you'd be interested in hearing. We are planning on doing more webinars, and we'd love to make it happen. So please do reach out to us and tell us your thoughts, or also tell us any other suggestions you may have, and look out for us. Thank you.